Okay, imagine you're standing right here where the Mississippi River, this incredible river, flows past. Now just turn around. What you see is the French Quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And we want you to think of this walk not just through a neighborhood, but like turning the pages of a living encyclopedia.
That's a great way to put it, because this area, the Vieux Carré, the Old Square, it wasn't just random growth.
Right.
When the French set it up in 1718, it was pure strategy. They wanted control, control of the Mississippi, command of all the commerce moving up and down.
That strategic vision, controlling the river, that's sort of the starting point for everything else here.
It really is. It shaped everything.
And walking around, you might assume everything looks French from 1718, but that's not quite right, is it?
No, not exactly. A lot of the architecture you really notice, the iconic stuff, it's actually later. Much of it came during Spanish rule, late 18th century, after some big fires.
Okay.
And then more changes in the early 19th century after the Louisiana Purchase brought in American styles and, well, influence.
So it's layered. French foundations, Spanish rebuilding, American additions.
Precisely. You're walking through layers of history etched into the buildings themselves.
So let's imagine starting our walk right down by the riverfront, Woldenberg Park, the Moonwalk, named after Mayor Moon Laundrie, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a good spot to connect with that original purpose, watching the river traffic, maybe some street performers. It really grounds you in the city's relationship with the Mississippi.
It feels like the right starting point. Now, thinking about the layout, Adrien Apage, the French engineer, laid out that grid back in 1722, 70 squares. Very orderly on paper.
Very orderly. But as you walk, especially near the Canal Street end, you might notice, well, the ground isn't perfectly flat.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It dips a bit.
It does. That upriver western corner is geophysically lower. It has to do with how the river deposited sediment over thousands of years.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the Esplanade Ridge formed way back maybe 4,300 years ago. But the land right by the river, that slitter by the river, is much younger, maybe 1,100 years old. That western part just didn't get as much of the buildup.
So that slight slope, the lower ground, it's literally ancient history beneath your feet. And I guess that relates to flooding, too.
Absolutely. That lower section, it's been flooded from outside water, river, lake, storm surge at least 4 times in the last couple of centuries.
Wow. Any specific examples?
Well, there was a big one in 1849, a crevasse, a break in the levee, upriver on Swallows Plantation. The water apparently reached all the way to Bourbon and Canal.
Bourbon and Canal, that far in.
Yep. And interestingly, that same general area was where the floodwaters reached their highest point within a quarter after Hurricane Katrina in 2005.
That really puts it in perspective. So how much lower are we talking?
It's roughly 2 feet lower than, say, the corner of North Rampart and Esplanade, and maybe 7 or 8 feet lower than streets right by the river like Decatur, North Peters. That difference matters. It certainly does. Okay, so we understand the ground beneath us a bit better. Now let's look up at the buildings. You mentioned the different eras showing through the architecture.
Where it's like a visual timeline. You've got Lafitte's blacksmith shop over on Bourbon Street.
Yes, the famous one.
Famous and significant because it's one of the very few buildings that actually survived those huge fires in 1788 and 1791. So it gives you a real glimpse of that earlier French colonial style.
Made of, what, brick between posts?
Sort of, yeah. Different construction methods. And of course, there's the whole Jean Lafitte connection, the pirate story. Maybe legend, maybe some truth, but it adds to the mystique.
And after those fires, you said the Spanish came in with new rules?
Exactly. New building codes, they mandated brick construction, trying to prevent another huge fire.
Where's the best place to see that Spanish colonial influence?
Jackson Square, definitely. Look at the cabildo that was the Spanish city hall, essentially.
Right, and the presbytery next to it, they look like twins. They do. Classic Spanish colonial style. And the cabildo is hugely important. Historically, that's where the Louisiana Purchase was actually signed.
Transferring all this land to the U.S. Wow.
A massive moment. And while you're around there, look for those Spanish details. The wrought iron balconies, the hidden courtyards. They're everywhere once you start looking.
Okay, so French, then Spanish, then Creole architecture. What makes that style distinct?
Creole townhouses are often quite narrow from the street, maybe just one room deep. But look for the galleries, the balconies running along the outside, sometimes with that beautiful, intricate cast iron work.
Like fancy lace, almost? I think I saw one like that on Royal Street. Added later, maybe.
Very possibly. Like on an 1841 townhouse, the gallery was added around 1858. And often, there's a service wing heading towards the back, creating this private courtyard space. Very characteristic.
Functional, too.
And you also see lots of shotgun houses, single and double. Long, narrow buildings, doors and windows lined up so you could, in theory, shoot straight through. Hence the name.
Right. Got it. Then, after the Louisiana Purchase in 1903, American styles start appearing.
They do. You start seeing Greek revival. Think wide, flat trim around doors and windows, maybe grand, full-height porches with big classical columns.
Different feel from the Creole townhouses.
Yeah, and often with interior staircases, unlike the Creole style, which usually had exterior stairs.
Yeah.
Then later you get Italian influences too.
Italian. What should we look for there?
Taller windows, sometimes with arched tops, decorative moldings over them, often paired doors, very symmetrical fronts, maybe brackets under the roof eaves, and those reinforced-looking corners called quoins gives it a kind of substantial, solid look.
It really is an architectural journey just walking a few blocks. Let's swing back to Jackson Square. You called it the nucleus.
It absolutely is, like the main plaza and those three big buildings facing the River St. Louis Cathedral in the middle.
Beautiful building. It's a basilica now, right?
Minor basilica, yes.
Yeah.
Flanked by the Cabildo, which we mentioned was the Spanish government seat and where the purchase was signed, and the presbytere.
What was the presbytere originally for?
Intended for clergy, but ended up being used as a courthouse for a long time. Now, like the Cabildo, it's part of the State Museum complex. They hold so much history.
And right across the way. You can practically smell it from here. Café du Monde.
Oh, yeah. Beignet and Café au lait, they've been serving that up since around the Civil War era. It's just essential.
Part of the ritual. Blowing the powdered sugar, making a whiz.
That's the tradition. And don't forget, the music in the square. That's not new either. There's been live music, street musicians right there for, well, over 100 years. It's part of the soundtrack.
Really is. Okay, so from Jackson Square, maybe a bit calmer, you can walk just a little way and hit Bourbon Street. Very different energy.
Very different. It's one of the city's oldest streets, actually one of the original 20. But yeah, today it's a 15-block entertainment zone.
Big for tourism, but also known for, well, being a party street.
That's fair to say.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it evolved. Entertainment used to be more inside the clubs and bars. But then, around 1967, the Go Cup became a thing.
Ah, the plastic cup to take your drink outside.
Exactly. And that really blurred the lines, didn't it? The party spilled out onto the street, which became pedestrianized. Public space, private space, all mixed together.
And Lafitte's blacksmith shop is on Bourbon Street, too, right? That quiet old place amidst all the noise.
It is a real anchor to a much earlier time, standing right there.
It shows there's more to the quarter than just Bourbon Street, though. What's a reward for wandering off the main drags?
Oh, definitely wander. You find the quieter, more residential parts. That's where you can really appreciate the details, those hidden courtyards behind gates, the subtle shifts in building styles block by block. It gives you a feel for how the neighborhood grew, organically.
And the culture here wasn't just French and Spanish, was it? It was a real melting pot.
Absolutely crucial to remember that. French, Spanish, yes, but also significant African influence, especially from free people of color who often had access to European musical training. And then later, American immigrants, including large groups like Sicilians,
All mixing together.
creating this incredibly rich cultural soup. It's fundamental to understanding where jazz came from, that blend of European traditions, spirituals, blues, ragtime. It all happened here.
And it attracted artists, too, later on.
Yes, early 20th century, it became a bit of a bohemian hub. Artists, writers. And interestingly, that group was part of the reason early preservation efforts started. They recognized something special was here.
Which brings us to preservation. How did so much of this survive? It seems remarkable.
A key moment was establishing the Vieux Carré Commission, the VCC. It started in 1925, kind of advisory at first.
Okay.
But its powers were strengthened, especially in the 1930s and 40s. It gave them real teeth to regulate changes to buildings within the historic district boundaries.
So you can't just paint your building any color you want or tear something down easily.
Not without review and approval. Those boundaries are specific. Esplanade, the river, Canal de Kitchener, Iberville, and then Basin St. Louis and Rampart. That oversight has been crucial.
But it must still face challenges. It's a living city, not just a museum.
Huge challenges. Flooding is still a risk. As we saw, even after Katrina, about 9% of the quarter flooded then, mainly in those lower areas we talked about.
Right.
And there's always the push-pull between modernization and preservation. Plus, balancing the needs of a massive tourism industry with the lives of the people who actually, live here.
And big events leave their mark, too, I imagine, like closing Storyville back in 1917 or Katrina.
Definitely. Those events shaped the neighborhood profoundly. But the French Quarter is resilient. The commitment to keeping its character, despite everything, is pretty strong.
So as you finish your walk, remember you're literally stepping through history, not just looking at old buildings, but feeling the landscape, seeing the layers.
Yeah, notice the details, the architecture, the
Yeah.
street names, some are still the old Spanish ones, even the subtle slope of the land. It all tells part of the story.
And maybe think about this. Knowing about the geology, the floods, the different waves of people, French, Spanish, African American, how does that change how you feel this place?
Mhm. What other stories are hidden in the quieter corners? And you have to wonder, what stories will these streets tell next?